Good morning. The time's 9:32, and I'd like to call the 265th meeting of the DC Water Board of Directors to order. This meeting is being held electronically via Microsoft Teams. And Ms. Manley, would you please call the roll of the full board and certain staff to establish a quorum and to determine attendance?
Thank you. Chairman Wells,
Here.
Crystal Bloomfield, Rush Nabat,
Here.
David Franco,
Here.
Alan Borman,
Here.
Emil Thompson,
Here.
Floyd Holt,
Good morning. Here.
Joseph Gill,
Here.
Adam Ortiz,
Present.
Adriana Hochberg,
Here.
Randy Bartlett,
Here.
Jed Ross,
Good morning, present.
Joe Leonard,
Here.
Reverend Carrie,
Here.
Howard Gibbs, Anthony Giacola,
Cola here.
Ivan Frischberg, Lavinia Baxter, Stephen Chauffeur,
Here.
Sarah Marsh, David Gaddis,
Present.
Mark Battle, and Matthew Brown.
Good morning. Here. Mark Battle's here.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manley. I just want to note to everyone again that as we get started, we will be going into executive session today, and there will be special instructions on how to sign out and then sign back in. So just alert. With that, let's, can I get a motion to approve the May 7th, 2020 minutes?
So moved.
And can I get a second? I don't hear a second. Adam seconded it. I see Adam there. So is there any discussion or amendment to the minutes? Okay, all in favor, either say aye or raise your hand on your screen.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The meeting minutes are approved. Very good. All right. So under Chairman's overview, we've got resolution number 20-53, approval of green infrastructure practicability assessment and recommendations for the CSO controls for the Potomac and Rock Creek sewer sheds. They'll be added to the agenda under joint use. Just so everybody knows, that will be added under joint use. And item 2 under non-joint use, resolution 20-52, approval to execute contract with Segres Construction Corporation will be removed from the agenda for a brief discussion in the executive session. So that's 2 things for the chairman. Also, let me just say before we move on to committee reports that how much we appreciate our team at DC Water, that you're continuing under the most extraordinary circumstances. And I know that it's just going to be a summer that unfortunately we're going to remember, but would love to forget, because we're going into, this is our first couple days of heat emergency as well. So we've got heat, we've got the pandemic, we've got some protests in our great city, and I know that the weather is going to be challenging for us. In some ways, the weather is of greater concern to our DC water infrastructure. But I know that, again, that not only do we have a great team of folks with contractors and with our own staff, but also with the leadership team that Mr. Gaddis has put together, that I am confident that we are going to continue to be top notch and that we're firing on all cylinders. And I am certain that we'll continue to provide the best service that you can possibly provide for a utility like ours. So thank you, and we will go forward with our committee reports. Let's start with the Governance Committee. Ellen Boardman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. The Governance Committee met on Wednesday, May 13th. The two items were a report from Corey Gray, Director of Compliance, on the proposed changes to the business development plan, and secondly, Tom Kaczynski, President of Blue Drop. So turning first to the agenda item on the proposed changes to the business development plan. This was a process that began back in the January committee meeting. Mr. Gray made a very detailed presentation, got through about half of it, and we resumed our review of the proposed changes in March. After that, we agreed that at the May meeting, we would get a recap, and then the committee members would decide whether to recommend moving forward to the full board, which they did. The process, as Mr. Gray reminded us, has been underway to revise this business development plan for about 2 years. And there's some, maybe we can ask everyone to mute again. I'm getting feedback somewhere, but moving forward, the changes did a couple of things. They aligned our program with the EPA program. And some of the changes in law that had come to pass in the last couple of years, since 2009, in fact, aligned our plan with some of the recommendations that came out of a 2017 RSM audit report, and otherwise attempted to incorporate a lot of the feedback and concerns and input, not only the DC Water staff, but of those who contract with DC Water. The long and short of it being, how do we encourage and provide more opportunity for disadvantaged local and small firms. And I think this program, which Corey Gray did a fabulous job on, and I want to tip my hat to him. He was a model of thoroughness, knowledge, and patience as we made our way through a long process. So again, I thank him, and Mr. Gaddis, I thank you for putting him in the position he's in. He's doing a great job. The first of the changes was to encourage local business enterprises in this area to participate on micro purchases and simplified acquisitions, and we set up a preference point system for those procurements up to $1 million. The second major piece was to address the financially assisted projects, the EPA funded projects, where again we aligned our criteria with those that are in the federal program, and also focused on greater outreach, education, and similar programs to get a broader range of people within the bidding process. The third, and importantly, the establishment of a new program for non-federally funded procurements over $1 million, and that is to support, again, disadvantaged business enterprises and women business enterprises. The elements of the program are to refine the certifications for groups and firms that will be able to avail themselves of preference points and overall review and monitoring programs. The benefits of the program include the development of a new mentor protege program, and again, education and outreach and ways to extend, the ability of people to bid on these projects successfully, not only as primes but as subs. And there are controls that are put in place to ensure that we have people who are actually doing the work. We're not just adding firms for percentage points or preference points, but we want people to be fully committed and able to do that work. So at the end of the day, the committee concurred with the approval of the program, and the details are set forth in the revised program, which is attached to Resolution 20-42, which again we are recommending to the board for approval today. The second agenda item was an update by Tom Kaczynski on Blue Drop. First of all, he provided us really an excellent report and on all aspects of Blue Drop that were very easy to follow, and we appreciate the information. First off, on Bloom. Bloom has excellent targets for this year, 60,000 ton target for fiscal year 20 sales, which is about 50% higher than last year. And we were doing fine until we got to April, and a combination of the pandemic and those challenges, along with a lot of rainy weather, made distribution of Bloom problematic. But we expect to be back on track with that. The other events are the ones we have at headquarters, which is a burgeoning business for us. Tom reported that we had 11 events since last October, and we had a host for the spring and the summer, which unfortunately were canceled, but we expect to get them back on track. But this, they've really done a great job at Blue Drop. Could we put our phones on mute? In advertising and getting connected with sort of that wedding industry. And I think we have lots of really great things ahead of us with events at the beautiful facility with a great view. We had an update on IP, and that is a couple of items. One, we have our fountains in Flint, Michigan. Unfortunately, that's on hold. The smart fountains because of COVID. We have the pipe sleuth, which you'll recall, and Tom had visited the UK, various sites that were using that. So again, things are on pause, but we have opportunities that are at least in the pipeline. And we have test videos that we're doing for certain counties, Baltimore County and Maryland, Houston, in providing pipeline assessments for utilities. And so that's some of the work we're doing. Tom reported also on our cell towers, the leases that we have, which will reap us, I think, approximately $80,000 a year for 2 particular leases, all good news. And we have the ability to get revenue for selling our renewable energy credits, and that's estimated to be revenue this year, for the remainder of this year, of about 130, and total revenue of about 800 thus far for those credits, selling those credits. So Tom provided a detailed financial report showing that we have net income of about $1.35 million through May 2020. We had a good discussion about the interrelation between DC Water and their participation in our income stream. And Tom noted that about 30% of Blue Drop's income comes from DC Water, which is derived from Bloom fees for the hauling, marketing, and sales cost. And it doesn't account for the anticipated direct savings of over $1 million as a result of our marketing and selling the Bloom product. So again, this has been really, really well done. And I thank Tom and his team for following on the good work of Alan Heyman. And I think, we have lots to expect from Blue Drop. So with that, the meeting adjourned at 9:58. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Human Relations, Emil, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, on May 13th, 2020, the Human Resources and Labor Relations Committee met. We began the meeting by addressing union concerns and comments. First, there were comments by all the unions thanking DC Water for its effort in protecting employees and working well with the unions to ensure that employees were safe during COVID-19. They were thankful for the quick action by DC Water management and their communication. Next, there was discussion of allowing vacation leave to be rolled over until the following calendar year due to an inability to take out-of-town trips. In the alternative, there was a request that vacation leave be converted into sick leave for the following calendar year. It was stated that leave balances for union employees are subject to the collective bargaining agreement, and therefore the unions should discuss this matter with management. Also, it was noted that while out-of-town vacation may be hard and difficult this time, employees should still take vacation time to vacation within the home and disconnect from work. Both Ms. Milton and Mr. Shank stated that they believe the rollover request would only apply to a small number of employees and encouraged DC Water to take this into consideration. We also discussed PPE and social distancing measures. There was concern expressed by Ms. Milton that wastewater operators were not receiving N95 masks, and she referred to the CDC guidelines. It was noted that the CDC guidelines do not mandate N95 masks for wastewater operators. Ms. Milton agreed with this, but stated that wastewater operators should have splash-proof masks as well as N95 masks. Management stated that wastewater operators currently receive the proper face coverings in accordance with CDC guidelines, and that moving forward, operators will have face shields and Tyvek suits. Additionally, management stated to Ms. Milton that they would work to make sure each wastewater operator has this equipment. Finally, management stated that due to shortages with respect to the N95 masks, only employees whose job required the mask and employees who have been fitted properly will receive the N95 mask. Ms. Milton still had further concerns about who should receive the N95 masks, and both union and management were encouraged to discuss this matter further. The last issue that was presented by the unions was around DC Water reopening. Mr. Gas confirmed that he does have a working group to determine what DC Water looks like when it reopens. He said that he would communicate with the unions before any final decision was made. Next, we had a retirement plan update and presentation. There were two proposals presented to the committee. The first was to the 457B, which included adding an after-tax Roth option to avoid taxing in the future. The second proposal was to amend the 401A plan to allow payments via ACH instead of payroll withholding. Both of these proposals were considered by the committee and recommended to go before the full board for your approval, and they will be up today on today's for consideration today. Additionally, the committee was informed about the removal of the Fidelity Balanced Fund and mapping of those assets in the fund to an age-appropriate retirement fund. This will help correlate employee investment risks with employee expected retired age. There is expected to be no fiscal impact to DC Water. Boardman asked if DC Water was compliant with the provisions of the CARES Act governing employer retirement plans, and management confirmed that it is. There was no executive session for this meeting, and it was adjourned at 11:54 a.m. And well, that is my committee report. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Thompson? All right, Environmental Quality and Operations Committee, Mr. Adam Ortiz.
Thank you, Chairman Wells, and good morning to colleagues and staff. The EQ and Ops Committee met on May 21st. We addressed 4 joint use items, 2 of them dealing with treatment polymers, the other 2 with the screening facility. We dealt with 2 non-joint issues, contracts concerning small diameter water main replacement. We recommended all these items to the full board. Very able Vice Chairman Howard Gibbs inquired about the effort being made by the authority to transition subcontractors into roles as prime contractors. And that's an issue that we're going to take up with Mr. Benson at a future meeting. We convened an executive session for an hour, and we recommended that the green infrastructure practicability presentation be presented to the full board at this meeting. The meeting was adjourned at 10:54 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you.
Oh, and we also gave a warm, rousing welcome to Keisha Powell. We're very pleased that she's the COO and glad to have her on the team. Great addition. That was the highlight of the meeting.
Thank you. I would agree. All right, finance and budget, David Franco.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody continues to stay safe and sound. The Finance and Budget Committee met on Thursday, May 28th, and Mr. Brown provided a monthly financial reporting by exception. As of the end of April 2020, revenues were slightly above budget at $418.9 million. Operating expenditures were at $311.9 million, and capital disbursements were at $181.9 million. Mr. Brown informed the committee that phase 1 and 2 of the ERP project are advancing, but due to COVID-19, phases 3 and 4 have been delayed. Next, given the situation, a plan to restrict the use of credit cards by non-residential customers has been paused at this time. Excuse me. Next, Mr. Guttridge provided a FY 2020 second quarter CIP report by exception. He stated that the authority projects capital disbursements of $355.4 million by the end of the year, and that's below the adopted budget baseline of $405 million for capital construction projects. These are primarily due to delays in construction contract-related items and fewer repairs. Next, Mr. Guttridge stated that all three KPIs for quarter 1 were met. However, only 7 of 9 KPIs for quarter 2 were met, and an explanation will be provided next quarter. Mr. Giancola asked about contract labor and about precautions taken due to COVID-19. Mr. Guttridge explained that construction is considered essential and it's not impacted the workload, and that adequate safety precautions are taken. Moreover, the engineering team has been working with the finance team on the impact of COVID on the capital program, and a future update will continue to be provided. Next, Mr. Brown updated on the fiscal impacts of COVID-19 for FY 2020 projections, as well as 2 action items that will require recommendation to the board. The first of these is the first proposal reduces the FY 2020 operating budget for debt service by $8 million, and the second transfers that $8 million cost savings to the rate stabilization fund. This, along with the $5.6 million in projected FY 2019 unexpected Cap 2 funds, will be withdrawn in FY 2021 and 22, consistent with the board adopted financial plan. Mr. Brown highlighted the authority's response to customers' needs during COVID-19, including reconnecting service to 136 customers so far, suspending disconnections for non-payment, and suspending late fees, providing emergency relief funds for district residents in arrears. Next, Mr. Brown provided an update on the impact of COVID-19 on overall consumption, which is about a 9% decline. While the consumption is up for residential, multifamily, and DC housing, authority customers, the commercial category, is down 30%, along with declines in municipal and federal consumption. Moreover, there is an increase in customer delinquencies, while there are decreases in various fees collected. Despite these challenges, DC Water remains financially strong, with over 250 days of cash in reserve funds and about 25% of our overall revenues are fixed, such as metering fee and CREAC. Regarding expenditures, most of the operating expenditures are fixed, and management has implemented deliberate measures to curtail spending. Mr. Brown explained they have adopted a three-piece principle of financial guidelines in response to the pandemic: preserve cash, provide essential services to our customers, and prioritize our employee safety. Next, Mr. Brown reported a projected operating revenue shortfall of about $35.2 million, while both the operating expenditures and capital disbursements are projected to be below their budgets of $31.8 and $58.1 million, respectively. The revenue shortfall assumes consumption's declines of 37% in the commercial and 30% declines in municipal categories from May to September. Other areas of lower revenues include charges on late fees and delinquencies, system availability, and interest income. The favorable variance of $21.6 million for the operations and maintenance budget is consistent with the year-to-date financial performance. Savings in the O&M are also attributed to work done by each department to identify cost savings in response to COVID. A $29 million underspending for debt service is mainly due to refinancing, refund, and lower rates on existing debt. Next, Mr. Brown summarized that the COVID-19 revenue shortfall and lower expense impact to result in a forecasted net deficit of $12.7 million, and explained that this shortfall will be mitigated by reducing pay-go used for capital projects, and instead will use funds from bond proceeds previously issued. Mr. Brown stated that additional review is being done on the impact of the pandemic on FY 2021 revenue, operating expenditures, and capital disbursements. And he also expressed concern about commercial buildings, restaurants, and hotels consumptions as they may continue to operate at lower capacities. The team is currently reviewing the revenue and expenditure forecast and will explore every opportunity to reduce cost. Mr. Brown then reviewed the recommendations and two action items to reduce and transfer $8 million in debt service cost in 2020 and operating expenditure budget to the rate stabilization fund, and transfer $5.6 million in FY 2019 unexpended kept to the rate stabilization fund. Mr. Brown commended the collaborative efforts undertaken by the executive team and department heads, including thorough analysis and review by the staff of the finance department. And I just want to say that it's quite impressive that with all the impacts of COVID-19, that at this time, the bottom line impact is only a $12.7 million deficit, which considering all that's going on is pretty minimal. Next, Mr. Boykin, Director of Finance, presented the insurance renewal term available to DC Water covering the period of July 1st through July 1st, 2021. He presented management's request for the authority insurance renewal coverage at a not to exceed amount of $3.5 million, which is consistent with the budget. Mr. Boykin provided detailed information about the market conditions. Most of the premium increases are attributed to industry-wide property and liability losses, and that he also noted that the full effects of COVID-19 loss levels are not yet known. The committee members then agreed to move the following action items to the full board, and that was approval to revise the FY 2020 operating budget for projected debt service cost savings, and the approval to transfer 2020 projected debt service cost savings plus the unexpended 2019 Cap 2 funds to the rate stabilization fund. And last, recommendation for approval of funding for annual property and casual insurance renewals. And the meeting was then adjourned.
Thank you. That's there's a lot in that report. Any questions for Board Member Franco? All right, thank you very much. Now, under the items of general interest, two things. One is just want to be sure everyone knows and announce that according to the contract with our general manager, that as we agreed as a board, that the executive committee will be providing a performance review, and we will be coming back to the board with recommendations. I'll provide an outline of schedule as I work on this with Mr. Gaddis to be sure that it all makes sense. But the process begins in June, and the executive committee I'll be sending out instructions to the executive committee, and I expect to have a recommendation to the board in August, and so that we're on track this year for getting through this process in a timely manner. And again, that's just of general interest to the board and to the public that we're entering into the performance review phase with our general manager. And then the other thing is, let me ask either the general manager or Mr. Gaddis, either Mr. Gaddis or Ms. Manley, at what point were we going to, in our agenda, I'm looking through here, get a presentation regarding clean rivers? Is that on our agenda today?
It is on our agenda, but Mr. Gaddis, would you prefer it now or after your general manager's report? You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Gaddis.
I'm sorry. I apologize. We can do it now. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Well, I'll do it whenever. I just didn't see it on the agenda, and so I wanted to be sure I was being, that I recognized it. I'll leave it to you if you want to do that within your report, Mr. Gaddis.
If I think I'm after this anyway, so we can go ahead and do that report now, and then I'll do my report after that, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So
okay. Thank you.
So I'm still going to kick it back to you.
Yep.
For whoever you want to call on.
No problem. Mr. Carlton Ray will be giving us the report on clean rivers today. So Carlton, I'll hand it off to you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Gaddis, thank you so much. Again, I'm Carlton Ray, VP for Clean Rivers Project. Again, hello board, hello all, Chair, and of course, Mr. Gaddis. So I'm also joined with Seth Chard, who's in charge of our green infrastructure program for DC Water, and John Cassidy, who's also a program manager for Clean Rivers. So there'll be a little bit of a tag team here. We're going to talk about the green infrastructure practicability assessment. And as most of y'all know, we've been working feverishly for the last several years, basically building green infrastructure as part of the federal consent decree to look at whether it can reduce the amount of overflows that we need to target to meet our federal consent decree goals and objectives. So back in 2005, the diagram on the left was the long-term control plan that was passed to address the raw sewage problems here in the district of the combined sewer overflows, either flowing into the Anacostia, Rock Creek, and Potomac. As time progressed, it's kind of a little bit of evolutionary thought process. The idea was, instead of building a gray solution, we would build both a combination of gray and green solution, green infrastructure. But nobody had built green infrastructure on the magnitude that we need to build in the country, in the world. Frankly, we looked at we did technical memorandums both internationally as well as nationally to address combined sewer overflows like we were planning to do. So we schemed up this approach with green infrastructure to do a pilot project in both these areas. The green blob up on the north there is the Rock Creek Basin, the Piney Branch area. Instead of building a 9.5 million gallon storage tank that was called out in the original consent decree, we propose building a basically green infrastructure that manages the volume of 1.2 inches of rainfall over 365 acres. And something similar to that down in the Potomac area. It's hard to tell in a small diagram. There are a couple of larger diagrams I'll show in just a moment. But basically, the green infrastructure on the right-hand side in the Potomac area, that tunnel used to go all the way out to the last CSO. So in the 2005 consent decree, that was committed by DC Water to pick up that by a tunnel. What we tried to do the last several years, let's build this pilot project. Let's look at the efficacy of the green infrastructure in that area, and see if we can reduce the tunnel length and do green infrastructure in lieu of that. So we basically, again, with all these different rationale of basically there hadn't been a large amount of green infrastructure. Let's go ahead and test it with this approach. We'll come back to the federal government in this year, looking again at the efficacy and a series of criteria on the practicability of green infrastructure in these two areas. GI obviously offers triple bottom line benefits: economic, environmental, and social. We also worked hard and came up with a green infrastructure certification program for local jobs, and worked with the Water Environment Federation, and then partners all the way across the country, from San Francisco to New York to Kansas City to Boston. So just a wide variety of communities to develop this green infrastructure certification program. That was led by DC Water. And then finally, we eliminated a large tunneling pump station over by the Lincoln Memorial that was originally proposed back in 2005 with the modification in 2016. We're one of the highest capture rates in the country. Ultimately, we were going to meet water quality standards. It was determined by US EPA and DOH that if we build the long-term control plan, once we build it and show that it's successful, we will show that it will meet water quality standards, and thus it was a big deal for us to get that approval. That was done back in 2003. But one of the reasons is that we're one of the highest captures in the country. We're at 96 overall capture rate for combined sewer overflow. And again, at the end of the day, we meet water quality standards with our amendment with our federal consent decree program. Where are we? We're currently on schedule and budget. We're a multi-billion-dollar program, and there's not many places in the world that can say that. On the right-hand side there, that's is a diagram of what we're currently building or what we built. Purple is what we've already constructed. Orange is what we're currently constructing, and yellow is either planning or design phase. The purple line is 7 miles of tunnel, 23 foot in diameter, from Blue Plains up at RFK Stadium. That's been constructed back and brought online back in March 20th of 2018. Our consent decree deadline, if y'all remember, was March 23rd, 2018. So we met it by 3 days. So every day and every hour is very, very important for Clean Rivers. We have really a tight time frame to build this program, and again, we've been doing marvelous so far. We built that tunnel and brought it online of 2018, and since that time, we've captured over 7.7 billion, not million, but billion gallons of sewage that would have gone into the Anacostia. And also, we've caught over nearly 3,700 tons of trash and solids. There's some organic material in there as well, but a whole bunch of solids and trash that would have ended up in the Anacostia. So it's been doing its job. We were estimating that we were the first phase, that purple line there that we've constructed from Blue Plains up to RFK. We would the goal was to capture 80%. We're achieving over 90% so far. So we're doing again percent captures again doing quite well. on that program so far. On the orange line is the Northeast Boundary Tunnel. We're currently constructing the Northeast Boundary Tunnel. We've been mining all the way through this whole pandemic. We've been working very hard to reduce the risk of our employees as well as the workers on the program. Again, we're doing very well on that. But you can see the tunnel boring machine named after Chris Allen. He used to be our construction manager. He passed away several years ago. And the tunnel boring machine is named Chris. He's mined about over 3 miles. We've mined underneath the Amtrak yards, the Acela tracks. We mined into the W Street shaft and did some work on it. And now we're moving forward mining to the north to make that turn near the Home Depot on Rhode Island. And then we'll come down underneath the Rhode Island Metro and right on down Rhode Island. Once we complete the Northeast Boundary Tunnel in 2023, a drop of water will flow from First Street Tunnel 13 miles all the way down into Blue Plains. That whole area was built by the federal government, primarily built by the federal government. A lot of that area has been, all those sewers that were built up there were undersized, as well as the transmission down to the Anacostia, that big sewer line that was built in 1894, was undersized as well. And so we're solving something that's been a problem, the flooding problem, since the World War II time frame. Every 5-10 years, they've had flooding up there when a good gully washer is occurring. We'll solve the flooding up there that's been going for years and years. So besides the amount of sewage that we're going to capture in the Anacostia and water quality improvements in the Anacostia, we'll also solve a long-standing flooding problem, a sewage backup problem up in the LaDroit Park and all those neighborhoods along Rhode Island Avenue, northeast. You can see we're currently in design phase Potomac Tunnel, and then the 2 yellow blobs that used to be green. Basically, those are the 2 projects that we're going to talk about today. The Practicability assessments of the 2 green infrastructure projects of those 2 areas. Thank you. Go ahead. Again, what we worked with the federal consent decree, through the federal consent decree with the Department of Justice, EPA, is to have a 2-track solution. If green infrastructure is practical based upon the flow monitors we installed initially, we build the green infrastructure, do the post-construction flow monitoring, and look to the practicability associated with that and the efficacy if it determines to meet our needs, then we continue on with green infrastructure. If it doesn't, and again, there was a number of other criteria, we go back to the gray solution that was proposed initially. And again, on the Potomac Tunnel, that was already extending all the way out already to CSO 29, the last 3 CSOs back in 2005. And then we can go back to the 9.5 million gallons storage tank or tunnel in Rock Creek. Go ahead. There are other considerations in the federal consent decree amendment. Basically, we looked at constructability, operability, efficacy, public acceptability, and cost per impervious acre. They have 180 days when we submit this. The Rock Creek Practicability Assessment Report will submit June 15th of this year, and then the due date for the Potomac is August 17th of this year. We will plan to submit that before then. Important aspect is, besides the green infrastructure that we are constructing and the improvements we're doing in the combined area with the tunnels, DOEE and the district is also trying to improve the water quality in the stormwater outlets and program areas that's outside the combined area. And so they have regulations, stormwater regulations that they passed a number of years ago that basically is trying to improve that water quality in those areas. Those regulations were also passed for the combined area as well. And so those were recognized, those regulations were recognized back when we were negotiating the previous amendment back in 2015, 2016, and with the Department of Justice, because improvements were being made for schools, green roofs for schools, improvements were being made for developments that were going in those areas. And those costs get passed on to our ratepayers or to our taxpayers. And so the district residents were already having to pay for it. So let's get benefits out of it. So we can take credit for those acres and for that and the GI facilities that were constructed in conjunction with those. And that was an important aspect that we're going to take good use of. And then finally, anything that we build, we're going to maintain from here to eternity. So our responsibility for any green infrastructure is just like for any water and sewer infrastructure, is that we maintain it from here to eternity. That's for the work that we do. So I'd like to turn it over to Seth Char, who's in charge of our green infrastructure program, and talk about the things that we've been working on over the last several years to make GI successful. Seth.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, I'm Seth Sard. I'm the Senior Advisor for Green Infrastructure on DC Water's DC Clean Rivers project. As Carlton had mentioned, DC Water has significant experience and expertise in green infrastructure. Going back as far as 2011, we started a number of technical studies, and then moving forward, to today, we continue with our work in the field. And so this slide just covers a sort of a snapshot of some of the various projects and programs that we've been working on over the years. Potomac River Project A, which was the first large-scale green infrastructure project on the Potomac sewer shed, as well as the Rock Creek Project A, the first large-scale green infrastructure project in the Rock Creek sewer shed, where we're managing over 20 impervious acres. The Alley-Palooza partnership with DDOT, where we partnered with DDOT on their Alley-Palooza program, where they reconstruct 8 alleys in each of the 8 wards on an annual basis. We retrofitted, just the portion that we needed to manage the stormwater, utilizing standardized details, standardized designs, and a blanket permit to drive down costs and drive efficiency. We've been running a Downspout Disconnection program, which is a free program available to district residents out in our GI areas, where a resident can pick up a rain barrel or have their their downspouts disconnected, with that flow redirected out onto their landscaping to soak that water into the ground and keep it out of the combined sewer system. In 2013, we ran the DC Water Design Challenge to drive innovative, replicable, and cost-effective GI or green infrastructure practices. And we had 2 projects coming out of that, the GI Parks project off of Kansas and 2nd, Kansas and 3rd Northwest, as well as the 100 block of Kennedy Street Northwest, where we have a streetscape kind of showcase GI streetscape in place. We've developed utility protection guidelines to protect traditional DC water assets when either we're building green infrastructure or other entities, whether those are other agencies or developers are doing construction, making sure that we can protect traditional DC water assets. We developed our own green infrastructure construction standards, have standardized a lot of the designs through that, have supported the development and implementation of DDOT's green infrastructure standards, which is otherwise known as the Green Book. Again, launched the National Green Infrastructure Certification Program, which is now going international. And we use that certification with a training program we run through the University of the District of Columbia, where we train district residents and connect them with jobs either on our program or through other partners in the field. Down on the bottom, you negotiated a blanket permit with DOE and DDOT for standardized alleys. Worked through those standardized designs, again, for alleys, and then moving into buyer attention to drive efficiency and drive down cost. Conducted extensive pre-construction and post-construction modeling and monitoring. And then again, this GI Parks project that came out of the design challenge, and then various other planning and education kind of projects and programs with various DC schools and Georgetown University. So we have a lot of expertise and experience in the field, and have confidence in our ability to be successful with green infrastructure. So slide 7 gets into basically the practicability criteria and practicability assessment on Rock Creek. And Carlton, introduced the practicability assessment and the criteria that are in the consent decree. So those criteria are listed on the left-hand side of this table, going down the constructability, public acceptance, efficacy, operability, and cost effectiveness are all straight out of the decree for the practicability assessment. We've added 2 other categories here on the bottom under other for triple bottom line and economic benefits, and then protection of future infrastructure. This is a GI MOU with the district. So kind of taking it from the top and going across, the constructability in Rock Creek is good. We know how to build these projects. The contractors know how to build the projects. They did not have a lot of experience when we started this program, but that's really changed over the years as green infrastructure has, been constructed all over the city, both by us and agencies and private developers and homeowners. So the contractors know how to build it, and we, the assessment there is very good. So then moving into public acceptance. The assessment is also good. We ran a survey in the Rock Creek and Potomac GI areas after we built the projects. This was a pretty extensive survey, over 30 questions. But one of the main takeaways is that 64% of the residents would like to see more green infrastructure in their neighborhood. Moving down to efficacy, we know the efficacy is good. As we've moved through the program, we apply adaptive management and incorporate the lessons learned moving forward. And so, looking at the experience we've gained, we know how to build it, and we know that it will perform as it's intended. And that's being demonstrated in the post-construction monitoring data. Under operability, the assessment here is moderate. Really just the, maintenance is simple, but it's absolutely essential to assure ongoing performance. And, if it's not maintained adequately, then you can see that performance suffer. Down in the cost effectiveness category, we've actually split this into 2 pieces. So, what we have here, what we're calling the targeted GI, and then also the retrofit of public space. So the targeted GI is really the kind of lower cost, kind of low hanging fruit, sites that are maybe in a small park or a median or on the edge of a rec center or a school, or even an alleyway that's in good condition where we're just retrofitting the portion that we need with permeable pavement to manage stormwater. The flip side of that is this retrofit of public space, which the assessment is negative. So this is, the higher cost sites where there's a lot of utilities or very tight conditions in terms of managing traffic or doing the construction that we need to do, or having bioretention in a planting strip where there's a lot of concrete that needs to go into that bioretention because the planting strip is so narrow. And so, in those instances, the cost effectiveness is negative. And when you look at a full kind of 365 acre build out, the costs for GI really start to get very expensive and not competitive with gray when you take into account these higher cost sites, under this category of retrofit of public space. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the next slide. This next category under other, the triple bottom line and economic benefits. So we worked with a third-party consultancy that specializes in quantifying the triple bottom line and economic benefits associated with sustainability practices and with green infrastructure. And the outcome of that study demonstrates that there are substantially higher benefits for the community and in terms of economic benefits that can be realized with green infrastructure as opposed to an all gray approach in the Rock Creek sewer shed. And then finally, this protection of future infrastructure, this GI MOU with the district. This is classified as under the assessment as moderate. Essentially, this agreement is still open and in negotiation with the district. Once that's closed, the assessment would go back to good. But this is really just details about how we protect, our investment in green infrastructure as the district has to do work in public space, and how do we ensure that that investment is protected into the future? So we'll go to the next slide, please. So slide 8 is really an assessment of the alternatives for moving forward in Rock Creek. The alternatives are listed on the left-hand side of the slide. So alternatives 1 and 2 are straight out of the decree. So that's alternative 1 is the all gray approach that Carlton highlighted in that decision tree or flow diagram earlier in the presentation. Alternative 2 is the all green approach, which is again out of that decision tree. It's 365 acres of green infrastructure. And then alternative 3 is this hybrid approach. And this is actually the approach that we're recommending. And so if you look at the table and go across the top, we have capital cost, O&M cost, and then a 30-year net present value, which takes the capital cost and accounts for the O&M over the next 30 years and gives us a cost comparison between these 3 alternatives. And so you can see on the gray, all gray, we have a capital cost of $185 million, the all green $206 million, and then this hybrid capital cost of $133 million. So on the hybrid approach, we can be more cost effective on the capital side. When you look at the O&M costs, on the hybrid, we're a little bit higher than the all gray, but substantially lower than the all green. And when you look at a 30-year net present value, this hybrid approach is cost competitive with an all gray approach. And so how do we do this hybrid? So, essentially under Rock Creek Project A, we have already constructed 24 acres under the first project. And so we're looking at, building 66 new acres of green infrastructure to reach a total of 90 acres of green infrastructure constructed by DC Water. We will continue with our Downspout Disconnection program, but credit the disconnects that we've already completed to date at 0.1 million gallons, do a smaller gray storage facility instead of that 9.5 million gallon storage down at Piney Branch, a 4.2 million gallon storage facility at Piney Branch, and then credit the BMPs or the GI that's been constructed under the MS4 or the DC stormwater regulations for an equivalent volume of 2.3 million gallons. And we've worked closely with DOEE staff and gone through their database. These are sites that were constructed after 2002 and that have maintenance covenants or statutory requirements for maintenance attached to them. And so we feel confident in that volume. And so when you look at the total of the volume equivalent on the hybrid, we get to 9.5 million gallons, giving us the same level of control as the all gray approach in the long-term control plan. And this approach really, helps drive down cost for DC Water and DC Water ratepayers. Again, provides that equivalent level of performance while protecting our investment both into the infrastructure and programmatic investments that we've made. Maintains DC Water's leadership in the sphere and supports overall green infrastructure and sustainability initiatives in the district. And therefore, we are recommending this hybrid approach for Rock Creek. Go to the next slide, please. So shifting from Rock Creek over to the Potomac GI areas, this map shows in light blue the route of the Potomac tunnel. And then the 3 shaded areas on the kind of upper left corner of the map indicate the combined sewer areas associated with outfalls 27, 28, and 29. And these are the GI areas that have been identified. And it's important to note that, under the original plan, the Potomac tunnel was picking up these outfalls. And so that's shown, basically, the Potomac tunnel is shown extending in orange to pick up CSOs 27, 28, and 29 in the event that green infrastructure is deemed to be impracticable on the Potomac sewer shed. So let's move to the next slide, please. So same table that we saw, or sort of the same table setup that we saw on Rock Creek, but this time for the Potomac, and a different picture on the Potomac side. So when we look at the constructability criteria, unfortunately the assessment on the Potomac side is negative. That's really being driven by limited space in the Georgetown area and the historic Georgetown area. Conditions are very tight. Many of the streets don't have a planting strip that we could do, by our attention. Parking conditions are tight. The streets are narrow. The alleys are narrow. So it's just much more difficult to build green infrastructure in general, within that historic district that correlates with the combined sewer areas 27 and 28. On the public acceptance side, I'll note that we had positive reception from residents for the first project PRA in the Potomac up in Glover Park and Burleith. But again, as you shift down into CSOs 27 and 28, again correlating with the historic district, we have seen significant opposition from the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts, from the old Georgetown Board, National Capital Planning Commission, and so on. And so, very difficult to move ahead with green infrastructure in that historic district based on the pushback from those agencies. The efficacy, again, is good. We know how to build it. We know that it performs as it's intended based on the experience of our various programs and projects. Operability, same classification here as moderate. Cost effectiveness, just one category on the Potomac side. Again, negative, really being driven by the higher costs to construct green infrastructure in the historic district. Again, very tight conditions, just harder to get equipment in there for staging and maintenance of traffic and so on. All of those elements, as well as significantly more restoration of public space within those areas, are driving the costs up significantly higher. And then in the triple bottom line and economic benefits, again, a bit of a different picture here as well. Because there isn't as much open space, the green infrastructure on the Potomac side would by and large be a permeable pavement program. And you just don't see the same types of triple bottom line benefits with permeable pavement as opposed to a true green infrastructure approach, such as buyer attention that has many more triple bottom line benefits. And then finally, just the same classification for this open GI MOU with the district. So in sum, given the negative assessments for the practicability criteria on the Potomac side, the recommendation for the Potomac is to state that green infrastructure is impracticable and that we should revert back to gray infrastructure and continue the tunnel to pick up outfalls 27, 28, and 29 on the Potomac sewer shed. And I'll turn it back to Carlton. Thank you.
Carlton, you're on mute.
All right, sir. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Seth. So we presented this information back in April to the EQ and Ops committee. Then we turned around and presented the same information to a series of folks, our regulator, rather in the DOE, EPA, and DOJ, some of the NGOs, the council member Che, and National Park Service and EQ, and then back to EQ and Ops in May. And again, generally supportive of our approach. It was felt very good about our discussions with our regulatory brethren, the DOE and EPA and DOJ. Had good questions and generally supportive of our approach. So when we came back to the May board or May Q and Ops committee as a council member or Chairman Ortiz said that we recommended to present to you today our general approach of what we're trying to accomplish in these two areas. So again, we had a series of meetings, private meetings with a number of folks who basically had general support for our approach. Good. Okay, let's continue on. On the NGO meeting, the May 6th list, we got the folks who we invited folks who initially sued us back in '99, invited them to attend, as well as a number of other NGOs, environmental organizations. You can see a large number of folks. Again, lots of good feedback, lots of good questions about it. Again, general support of Clean Rivers and with the work that we've been doing on the Anacostia. And again, we'll, once we submit the report, we'll provide a link so everybody can have access to it. So if there's any other questions about it, we can answer. But the bottom line here is it was a very, very good, productive meeting that we had back with the environmental organizations on May 6th. Continue on. So the recommended approach, this is really basically a non-joint use issue. This is a DC only water, only DC or district residents discharge into this basin. So Rock Creek, for the Rock Creek GI and the Rock Creek solution, this will be all picked up, the cost will be picked up by district ratepayers. This won't be shared with the suburbs on this one. So basically, their approach, again, you can see what the Seth had laid out there, GI, the gray approach, the green approach, or the hybrid approach. And again, our suggestion is this hybrid approach. We're basically using the best of both worlds of gray and green and putting those together to come up with this hybrid approach. We're reducing the amount of risk that we're from the standpoint of green infrastructure, the amount of green infrastructure we're constructing. That helps us reduce the long-term risk for green infrastructure that we have to build and maintain, and any interactions we have with the district with a less amount of green infrastructure that we're constructing. Also, the Downspout Disconnection program, we worked well with Rock Creek Conservancy, who's been doing that on behalf of DC Water, working with residents. It's a great organization and it's a great great thing for residents. What can we do to help reduce combined sewer overflows? And by putting in rain barrels or rain gardens, this allows folks that could do it on an individual basis to participate, and that's a great thing, and we support that greatly. And also, we'll turn around and use the like Seth was saying, the stormwater regs, that green infrastructure that was constructed regarding with the stormwater regs, and finally the gray storage there. Again, the technology is the same as what's called out in the green and gray solutions in the federal consent decree, and we'll build this the same target. There will be, we believe, a modification that will be required to build this with this approach. If we believe all four parties agreed to it, it'll be a relatively low lift for us to get this done and to modify the consent decree to build this hybrid approach. But again, that's our recommended path forward on Rock Creek. Okay. Our next steps, we're going to have a webinar on June 11th. That was tentative, but I think that's almost set in stone now. And the goal is to submit the reports on June 15th, 2020. Again, they have 180 days to approve it. And our goal is to basically, I think we'll goal is to have this completed sometime in the fall or early winter of 2020 or 2021. So again, we'll be hustling. They're hustling. DOJ and EPA and everybody seems to be wanting to push this thing along because lots of folks think it's a good idea. And again, the goal is to have this thing all completed before the first of the year, or right there around the first of the year of 2021. So with that, any questions I can answer, or Seth or John Cassidy?
This is Floyd Holt. I have a couple of comments.
Yes, sir.
Let me preface by saying it's a very impressive and well thought out strategy.
Thank you, sir.
Similar to the county, we're engaged in an urban retrofit and stormwater management strategy to convert over 6,200 acres. So we understand the complexity of the process. I've heard some comments from WSSC, and perhaps Adriana and Steve in Montgomery County have heard, and Adam may have heard some comments, that WSSC was concerned that they hadn't been involved, hadn't received any briefings on the overall proposal, and their concern related to the fact that they thought that they may be making contributions to the expenses to the long-term control plan. But I just heard that it was strictly a non-joint strategy, and that Northern Virginia and Montgomery, Prince George's County would not be making contributions to that. I just wanted to confirm that so that I could report back that this was strictly a non-joint strategy.
Yes, sir. So I apologize. So again, for Rock Creek, that's the case, sir. For the Rock Creek sewer shed, for the Potomac, practicability or Potomac improvements, they do share the cost, part of the cost, about 4% of the cost, I think, for the Potomac. But what we do is we for part of the IMA approach, we'll go through on a detailed analysis and look at all parties, what they contribute to, what kind of flows they can contribute to the sewer and to the tunnel, and determine the cost and divvy up the cost at that time. We did that with all the other tunnels. It seems to go well. Again, that tunnel, what we're doing is going back to what was originally proposed in the 2005 MOU, where we're picking up those 3 CSOs with gray infrastructure. That was proposed back in the 2005 long-term control plan. We tried to look at green infrastructure as an alternative for that, but the bottom line, the large amount of pushback we got from public, as well as the higher costs, just doesn't make sense. And so we're going back to the most cost-effective approach by going back to what we originally proposed in 2005 with the extension. We'd be glad to meet with WSSC. There's no issues about that. Anytime they like to meet, we're glad to talk to them. But again, we evaluate on all these jobs. We follow the IMA and basically the protocol that's called out. When we get into detailed design, we determine what kind of flows that are coming in from various parties and divvy up the costs associated with it. Normally for WSSC, it's been about 4 or 5% of the for the cost for in that ballpark. But again, they'll pay for only what they'll use. If they're not using it, they don't pay for it.
Great. Yeah, I think I'd appreciate and request that WSSC get briefed on the process and the proposal and given a chance to react prior to the decision being made. And so if we could kind of integrate some dialogue with their principals so that we could allay some of the concerns about the process.
Carlton, this is Randy. Doesn't this type of information then flow through the regional committee, which includes WSSC and the other communities that contribute directly? And is there a timing process as to when all of that occurs? And I guess my question is, isn't that kind of the formal mechanism where you inform both WSSC and then kind of the Fairfax County wastewater at the same time?
Yes, Randy, that's exactly the case. And normally that's during the detailed design phase. We're about to roll into that for the Potomac Tunnel. So
Yeah, I think to the extent that we have to vote on the issue, I think there needs to be some more information, and that we need to be better informed about WSSC's thoughts on the issue when or at the time the resolution comes to the floor. So yeah, I understand the whole Council of Governments and the whole joint committee process, but I think some direct dialogue would put us in a better position of determining positioning if there was some more direct dialogue with WSSC principals.
I did have one more question. This is Emil Thompson.
yes,
I gave comparison between the three different models, the three different models. What is currently in the budget, and how is it different from what's currently budgeted going the hybrid approach?
So again, we had money budgeted for all green approach in Rock Creek. Now that will be split between the gray solution and the green solution, and we don't believe there'll be any additional costs. In fact, we believe there'll be savings from what was originally budgeted in the CIP for the program.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Carlton, as well, and maybe
Yes,
this
sir.
will help our suburban partners. There is no change from the original consent decree that we agreed with them on. Is that correct? And that's basically what we're going back to?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that was agreed to, and the IMA, latest IMA was agreed to in 2012. So that approach was agreed to in 2005. And again, we were trying to look at, see if we could shorten the tunnel with the green solution over in the Potomac area. Again, there was just pushback. We just couldn't make it work, as well as the cost was a lot higher than what the gray solution is. And so we're basically going back to the gray solution, which was approved back in 2005 by all parties, and by the board, obviously.
Yeah, I think to the extent that organizations change over 10 years, and obviously the record should be there, but like here in Prince George's County, I'm probably one of the last administration. So I still think there ought to be dialogue.
Excuse me, I don't know if somebody put us on hold and then left the meeting, but
like what it is.
I think Alfonso or whoever organized the meeting can mute any participant. Perhaps can mute everybody except for Mr. Floyd right now, who's speaking.
Alfonso?
We can mute them if they're on the calendar invite, but if they're calling from the outside, we can't mute them.
Can you disconnect them? Okay, thank you.
This is Joe Gill. Let me just sort of add one thought. Is the sort of first of all, I think this a great job has been done on this by all to present it. But I think ordinarily when we take up matters in EQ and ops, they're in not ordinarily, but they're often in open session, and typically WSSC attends those open sessions. and is able to, hear directly these presentations. I think what happened here perhaps is that we heard the presentation in executive session, and ultimately the funding for this, even though it is part of a longer term, consent order and agreement, and there's allocated percentages, pursuant to various agreements, WSSE was not sort of briefed on the wisdom of this. So I think just to add to Mr. Holt's point is that, our vote is in large part determined in consultation with WSSE, because it's their sort of ratepayers and that we're in part representing. So I just sort of add that is I think going forward, it may be the case that if something is in executive session that will ultimately involve or implicate spending by WSSC, we might just invite them along. And that's all on that.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that. Thank you, Mr. Gill, and thank you, Mr. Holt. This is something for the length of time that I've served on the board, I've always puzzled over, and I know the two utilities are in conversation on a staff level, but I don't fully understand the nature of the exchange and the partnership, and those of us in the Maryland suburbs do our best to represent taxpayers, but I don't know if we really think of ourselves specifically as representing ratepayers. So I'd like to flag maybe perhaps a chance to be briefed on just how interaction occurs, between the authority and WSSC. I think that might help me get my head around it. It's not to say we don't have coordination, but I think I struggle a little bit to fully understand, since the functions are so similar. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. GM, it's something perhaps we can talk about offline, if how we could structure a briefing, or if it's to a specific committee. But I think Mr. Holt's questions raise that for me, and it's something that seems to have bubbled up from time to time since I've been on the board.
So, Mr. General Manager, I'll kick that over to you, and Ms. Manley can organize that.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to comment on a couple things as a member of the committee. Like Mr. Gill, my hat is off to the work that the staff has done. It's very thoughtful, industry leading. The hybrid approach, I think, is the way to go. We all know green infrastructure is great, but it's limited. We have a lot of water.
I'm just looking at the board meeting.
I was going to go
walk right now. I have to meet Ryan in a few hours.
Oh, do you need to check for what?
Alfonso, can you mute that?
I think you need to mute.
Check.
I do need to check? Okay. Do you know how much it's for?
Yeah, he sent it in the text. I don't know. You should have. I can see the word.
Somebody needs to mute.
Adam, unmute yourself, please.
Well, that way nobody could disagree with what I'm saying.
Oh, I did.
So the results in the Anacostia from the Green Rivers program is the proof has been in the pudding. It's remarkable reduction in bacteria and litter, and I'm curious to hear from the team about what we expect for Rock Creek. We don't talk about Rock Creek as much as we talk about the Anacostia, for a variety of reasons, but Rock Creek is also a distressed watershed. And I'm just curious from an ecological standpoint, restoration standpoint, what impact we think that these future phases are going to have on that watershed.
So we currently, Sharon, we currently have somewhere between 25 and 30 times a year where that sewage overflow, combined sewage overflow, overflows into the Piney Branch. Once we get the improvements done, then we'll get them completed by the 2030 deadline. We'll get it down to 1. We'll go down from basically a large number, not as many, of course, as on the Anacostia Potomac, but get it down to 1 overflow. So basically dramatically less than what's going on now. there is other sources of pollution upstream that need to continue to get addressed. But you're taking this large source of sewage and getting it out of the creek. And so again, other things need to get done. Other watershed activities need to get done in the Rock Creek Basin. But again, we'll take this source of pollution that's been around for a long time and take it off the table. We won't see the volume like we see, the several billion gallons of sewage that's currently going to Anacostia, or used to go in the Anacostia, that we've been capturing now. But the number of overflows, it's a smaller stream, much as last year, right? That will be dramatically reduced, the number of events on that. Just for the chairman's purposes, we're really talking about the Rock Creek practicability assessment today. That basically that's the one that we're going to be submitting June 15th. And that's only district residents who provide sewage into that area. That's not a joint use project. Potomac is. That's due in August 17th. From the standpoint of support today, if we can get support for that one, if the district residents feel comfortable, or district participants feel comfortable pushing that forward, that would be a benefit for us from a staffing level. And again, we can meet with WSSC. We can meet anybody and everybody. You tell us you have somebody you want us to meet with, we'll meet with. We try to do our best, trying to meet with lots of folks, but obviously we missed WSSC, and it was just an oversight on our part, so I apologize. But again, if we can get the support for the GI practicability approach for Rock Creek, that would be a benefit for us, for the staff and for DC Water.
Got it.
Mr. Ortiz, did I answer that question? You addressed that?
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that.
You got it.
Mr. General Manager?
I guess at this point in time, I would agree with Carlton. If we could move forward on Rock Creek, that would be helpful. We will get with, as he said, we will get with WSSC and touch base with them. I just want to make sure that we're clear, though, that that we are delivering now in regards to the WSSC matter what they initially expected, which was more gray, or the tunnel, and so there's really been no change. The change occurred when we went to GI at that point in time, but we are more than happy to meet with them again and let them know that the changes we're going back to are what they signed up for, or what they expected, and we'll take care of that. So if we could at least, I guess, Carlton, we're asking for at least have the vote on and be able to move forward on Rock Creek Park.
Yes, sir.
On
Yes,
Rock
sir.
Creek, I mean.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So, Mr. Chair, if we could at least get that would be great.
Okay, are you saying we need a vote now?
Well, it would be advantageous for us, for DC Water, is that there would be a supporting some kind of resolution that supports our approach for moving forward in our negotiations with the EPA and Department of Justice that includes this hybrid approach. And again, we're committing to the same level of control. It's more cost effective. It keeps DC Water as a leader in GI. It reduces our risk with GI from the standpoint we don't have to build as much acreage. and also gets the performance that we're committed to with the gray approach. So it'd be good for us to get some type of a resolution for supporting us on that.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask Mr. Battle, can you form this into a resolution for us? Or because I don't think it's on our agenda as a resolution, is it?
We do have a resolution prepared. I think I'm not sure where on the agenda that is.
It's not on the agenda. It's resolution 20-53 that was sent to you all on, I think, yesterday evening from Mark Battle, sent it by way of me.
Okay.
And there are some slight edits that were made
Yes.
to the version. Right.
Yes, I sent that this morning about 9:40 when I received it.
And Mr. Chair, that resolution is giving me is the board granting me the authority to grant staff or allow staff to move forward with those changes that we've outlined for Rock Creek.
Is there any objection to because you've received generally the resolution, but it's not listed in the. The only way it's listed in the adopted agenda is resolution of the approval of green infrastructure practicability assessment. So it is listed in the agenda. Do I have a motion for the for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
And who seconded that?
Randy.
Okay, so the motion's been made by Adam Ortiz. Randy Bartlett has seconded it. Now discussion. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor, either by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed? Okay, please note that the resolution is passed unanimously without opposition. I'm going to kick it back over to you, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Wells and all board members. Before I get into my report, I want to first of all say thank you to each and every one of you for the experience that I've had in leading DC Water. Today is actually 2 years ago. Today is when I took over the helm at DC Water. I just realized that actually this morning, and so it has been a great ride for me. We've accomplished a lot, and I look forward to completing a number of other initiatives in our plan as we move forward. From a highlight standpoint, critical work continues for a reliable, resilient, and sustainable DC Water is what we all are looking forward to and that we want here at DC Water. Team Blue continues to successfully balance our critical services that we do on a day-to-day basis, even with COVID-19 related disruptions. We continue to provide reliable services, meeting critical drinking water regulations for the district and adhering to all of our wastewater treatment permits and managing CSOs and among other services. On some of our non-critical items that we have here at DC Water, we have slightly fallen behind some of our goals on those non-critical items due to COVID, and also attempting to meet the financials that we have in the front of us. And so I think that we've done a fantastic job in balancing all of these tasks that we have on a day-to-day basis here at DC Water. So I commend the team along with keeping all of our employees safe, which is one of the most important things that is before us as we do our daily tasks. As each of you know, back in May, I reported at that board meeting that we had added, and I filled out my executive team with the addition of Keisha Powell, former commissioner of the City of Atlanta Watershed Management, and she has joined Team Blue. She has really landed really well and gotten her feet wet, and has, even through COVID and being remote, has taken on a lot of the initiatives that we have here at the authority. And so she has rounded out my team along with with the core team that we've called the Core 6 team that leads DC Water on a day-to-day basis. And that team includes not only Keisha, but also Mark Battle from the Legal Affairs Department, CFO Matt Brown, People and Talent leader and EVP Lisa Stone, and last but not least, Wayne Griffith that's in charge of strategy and performance for us here at the authority. We have continued to move forward with our alignment, not only of this team, but all of our teams. We've done them through teams and remotely and those sort of things and different training sessions. So we had a training session on May 20th and one on May 27th for my group. And we have a third one coming up before we go into our retreat in July. So that team is coming together very, very well. I also want to report that we have had one additional positive test of COVID here at DC Water, which now takes us to 4. It was the individual did report and reported their testing, and we had people that were in close contact with them. Individuals are quarantined, so we've taken the proper measures to keep all the other employees safe, but we did have one other. So we are at 4, and only 2 of those cases are still open of the 4. And one of them is about to conclude here after their 14 days of quarantine. So I think we continue to do a very good job regarding the COVID so far. Other items that are on my desk at this point in time, the recovery is where we're at, where we've moved to now on the from a COVID standpoint. I have put together a task force that's led by Jason Hughes, that's in charge of water operations for us. He is working with a team of folks to talk about the slow return and what does that look like here at DC Water. We have began to put markings on the floors and where to stand in the elevator and all those sort of things that all of you, I think, see in your daily lives as you're out. So we're beginning to do the same sort of thing here. We've also engaged the individuals that we purchased our workstations from to talk about some of the redesign that may need to happen and making sure that we're keeping individual space apart and looking at what sort of shifts we should have. The other piece that goes along with that recovery is what does the new norm look like at DC Water? And so we also have a team that is working on that is led by Lisa Stone that's in charge of talent and also HR for us. And so she is working with a group to talk about what does the new norm look like. We're looking at what does teleworking look like here at DC Water. Are there additional people? We have made an investment in a new ADC system that we have installed, and it is now functional in our customer service department, which is working very, very well. They have blown all their numbers out of the water since the implementation of this phone system. They can actually measure performance of the employees through the phone system. So it is it's an item that was being installed before COVID, and it's now in place and has been in use for a week or 2 now, and it's very, very functional. And so we begin to look at what does the new norm here at DC Water look like? What are the things that we should continue to do? What are some of the things that we should maybe not do in the future? And then what do service levels look like? So we are way ahead from that standpoint, I think. And then the last thing for us that from an initiative standpoint is to continue to look at our financials. So Matt Brown and I are in constant contact, taking a look at the financials, taking a look at the revenues, our expenses, and making sure that we have the proper levers in place in case we need to pull them, that we can look at how do we manage the organization from a financial standpoint. And last but not least, as I promised you in February, I would update you on what we call the my utility state of the utility address that I made in February, where we talked about the 3 really initiatives of the authority that we're looking at every single day, and that's developing and a functioning, high-performing team that is data-driven. So we continue to work on that and to dive into that, enhance our resilience and readiness, and then last but not least, to engage with our stakeholders, which we continue to do even through COVID. And so with that, this month, one of the projects I wanted to report on was our ERP ERP program, Enterprise Resource Planning. We have continued to move forward with that. And as many of you know that were on the board in late 2015, early 2016, KPMG recommended that we needed a new ERP solution system here at DC Water. And we have taken that challenge on. So in late March, the Finance and Budget Committee got an update on the Business Transformation Program, also known as Project Zeus, here at DC Water amongst us. To date, the program has documented more than 100 as-is detailed business sub-processes in finance, procurement, and human capital. As a result, we've been able to reduce the project by 25%. The resource hours by 25% for this project. As you know, COVID has affected not only this project, but a number of other projects. So we sort of put the project on hold. But I will tell you that that we will be bringing it back on board to complete phases 3 and 6, which will address human capital and payroll and the budgeting functions. That is what has been deferred thus far. But the project, we are seeing a number of good things come out of our new ERP project today. Chairman Wells, that completes my report, and I will answer any questions that anyone from the board may have. Thank you very much. You're on mute, Mr. Wells.
Thank you. Once again, congratulations on your 2-year anniversary.
Thank you.
And thank you for your report and for your leadership during this tough time. So are there any questions for our general manager?
Chairman Wells, I do have a brief comment I would like to make. This is Board Member Thompson. I just want to thank CEO Gaddis for his strong words that he put out years ago in response to what's going on not only in the city but around the country with respect to the protest and Mr. Floyd. So I just wanted to really commit him to making a strong statement and speaking up on behalf of the city and the workers of DC Water.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you. I agree. And I think the board fully agrees. So we appreciate that leadership.
Thank you.
And it sends the message to our staff that we want them to hear. Okay, any other questions or comments for Mr. Gaddis?
I had a question. This is Steve Chauffeur. It talked about in your monthly report some work that was done on the alternate water supply with Black and Beach. There was a briefing, and I would just like to get some more information on that. I know it was a hot topic for a while, and just like to know what the next steps are, or what the outcome of the meeting with Black and Beach was.
I don't know if is Bijou or Keisha present. I think that talk was different than the alternative water supply that you're thinking of, is what I think. But if they're not present, I can get back with you with what that meeting was about. But I think it's different than the second source.
David, this is Bijou. I'm online. If you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
So the as you know, the alternative study was conducted through COG, and Black and Beach. They finally summarized their the report, and that's what presented to us. And when COG was present, as they submitted their final report out to us. So I don't know what are the next action from COG. That's up to them. But at this point, we fully support the general direction that collectively that we arrived at, which is what the Washington, Aqueduct, and AMP4, whichever solution they think it's the most value of suggestion is.
Yeah, so that wasn't our, I just want to make sure it wasn't anything that we reported out on or what they were reporting that we had asked for. This had to do with the COG report.
That's correct. The study was done under the COG's guidance. This was the final reporting of that. We can provide information to the committee.
Okay.
Does that help, Mr. Chauffeur?
I'm still not clear. Was this related to the second source or not related to second source?
Yes, it was.
It was a study. I mean, a finalization of the study.
Okay. And the direction was to move forward with Travilla as the primary source, as primary focus.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And by the way, we have supported that. I just didn't want anyone thinking that we were doing anything any different regarding second source.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Steve, thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions, comments, concerns for the general manager? Okay, there being none, we're going to move on to the consent items joint use. And they are 9 items. And so the one's an approval and adoption of the revised business development plan. The other is the approval and adoption of amendments to the DC Water and Sewer Authority plan and plan for represented and non-represented employees. The other is approval to exercise option 3 or option year 3 with our contract with Polydine. Approval to exercise option year 3 with, again, with Polydine. And then approval to exercise option 4 with Urban Services Systems Corporation. Approval to execute supplemental agreement number 1 with WSA HDR Engineering, and then approval to execute our contract with Alliant Insurance, and then approval to transfer $8 million of fiscal year 2020 projected debt service cost savings to the Rate Stabilization Fund. And then the 9th is approval to revised fiscal year 2020 operating budget for projected debt service cost savings from $250.3 million to $207.3 million due to debt savings. Can I get a motion to approve the consent items joint use?
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and approved. Who seconded it?
Rachna.
Okay. Thank you very much. And the motion was first made by Adam Ortiz. So all in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed? So it's unanimous without opposition. The consent items for joint use are approved. Then the consent items for non-joint use. Approval to execute contract with Gamr You companies. Number 2, approval to execute contract with Sagres Construction Corporation. Can I get a motion from a district member to approve the consent items non-joint use?
So moved.
So that's moved. Howard, you're on mute.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, item number 2, Sagres, that's what we're going to discuss in executive session, and then we'll have to come back out and approve that one.
So we'll remove that from the consent. And so the only item at this time on non-joint use will be the Gamr You company's contract.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And so I need a motion to approve it.
So moved.
So it's been moved by Mr. Thompson and seconded.
Second by Rachna Bhatt.
Second by Board Member Bott. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. I hear no nays. Therefore, the consent items non-joint use is approved. And with that, I will need someone. So thank you. Now I'll need someone to make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to the Open Meetings Amendment Act of 2010 to discuss legal, confidential, or privileged matters under DC Official Code 2-575. So I need a board member to make a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ortiz has made the motion, and I need a board member to second the motion.
Second the motion.
And I believe Mr. Bartlett seconded the motion. Will the secretary to the board please take the roll call vote?
Chairman Wells,
Yes.
Crystal Brumfield, Rush Nabat,
Yes.
David Franco, Ellen Borman, Emil Thompson,
Yes.
Jed Ross, Joe Leonard, Reverend Carrie, Howard Gibbs, Anthony Giacola, Ivan Frischberg, Floyd Hope,
Yes.
Lavinia Baxter, Joseph Gibbs,
Yes.
Adam Ortiz,
Yes.
Stephen Chauffeur,
Yes.
Adrian Hochberg, Randy Bartlett, and Cyril Marsh.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have to disconnect and connect into the executive session.
Right. And that will be an invitation in your calendar. So
Yes.
you should see the invitation in your calendar for executive session to get into that session, but you'll have to disconnect from this one. Thank you.